pursuing national security objectives, of which is constitutional amendment. And so with his new mandate, as he calls it, he will go ahead and continue pursuing that so that he can change Article 9 of the Constitution, which is the War Renunciation Clause.
So he's very much offering more of the same. Do people think that more of the same is what Japan needs? Clearly they do.
Well, again, I think that they looked at it and said, I don't think there's an opposition party that gives us justification for upending the status quo. Now, you had some rise to some opposition parties, some interesting ones, such as the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, which is now a viable left-leaning opposition party after this election. And so I think you'll start to see some changes to the political landscape, especially coming up with the party presidential election for the Liberal Democratic Party next year, and some jockeying for power that may change the dynamics here in Japan.
And in terms of North Korea, he talks about dealing firmly with the threat of North Korea, apart from continuing to ally himself and Japan with the United States. What does that mean?
Well, it comes down to he's going to continue putting pressure internationally. So firm pressure means that any country that Japan could try to leverage against North Korea, they'll continue to do so. Also, the exercises with the U.S. military that the Japanese self-defense force have been engaging in and shows of force, they'll continue doing. And then that firm pressure really comes from not backing down and not saying, at this point, we're going to give concessions to you and see if that works. So they don't have a stick yet to hit North Korea, but they're saying we're not going to give them any carrots.
Well, another of the ideas of Shinzo Abe is to change how the Japanese army works.
Yeah, so the constitutional amendment that he's looking at really isn't going to change too much about the structure of the self-defense forces, but it's going to open the door for future opportunities. So his view is that right now the War Renunciation Clause of the Constitution has never been amended. If he can get a fait accompli, if he can amend it just once, maybe later down the road there'll be more gradual allowances with regard to use of force against national security threats.
That's Mike Bozak from the International University of Japan. Let's go back to our live feed from Tokyo, where the re-elected Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is now taking questions from journalists. Let's listen to what he's saying.
And I have mentioned it in our pledges as well, but it has been positioned as one of my primary pledges for the first time, and I have categorized in 4 different ways. And by 2020, I have mentioned that.
So that's the live news conference being given by Shinzo Abe in Tokyo right now. Let's get a bit more analysis of what this means in the context of the economy of Japan, which is one of those crises, I suppose, that Shinzo Abe was talking about during the campaign. Philip, what do you think?
Well, indeed. He's been in power since 2012 now. Of course, he's going to have, according to all the projections, a super majority, which will give him increased ability to try and cause Japan's economy to recover. Japan, you've got to remember, went through a patch that people generally refer to as the lost decade. Little bit of a misnomer, given that it started in 1992 and continues more or less through to where we are right now, which is considerably longer than a decade. Essentially, he's won a mandate in order to push further with what we generally call Abenomics. This is his prospective plan to try and boost the Japanese economy and get it to recover properly.
Right, and he's not going to change course. I mean, his whole pitch to the electorate is more of the same. Stick with me.
Yes.
Is there any reason to think that Abenomics will be more successful in the period going forward than they have been up until now?
Well, Abenomics has actually been pretty successful up until now. It depends on what metrics you measure it by. You can actually point for evidence both ways on this front. The Japanese electorate clearly quite likes what's been going on, so there's a pretty strong indication that actually, if you're on the ground in Japan, things feel a little bit better under his stewardship. When you look at Japan's total GDP numbers, they don't really seem to be going up. So you might look at those and think, we're still in more of this lost decade, whether it's 20 years or 10 years or 15 years or however you wish to measure it. However, what you have to remember is Japan's population is decreasing, and so therefore on a per capita basis, everyone is doing better.
And ageing as well.
And ageing as
Rapid.
well, and it seems to be working. Now, the actual nature of Abenomics, just so you get an understanding, it's got three twin prongs to it. I should say three prongs, triple prongs, not twin prongs. Three triple prongs to it. One is monetary easing, fiscal stimulus, and structural reforms. Now, I see your eyes glaze over at each of those phrases. So, monetary easing, that's taking fists full of yen and shoving them into the gaping maws of banks and saying, lend this money. And that would be what we would call over here in the West, quantitative easing by another name. The fiscal stimulus is cutting government taxes and raising government spending. So one of the particular areas Mr. Abe is very keen on is actually changing the Japanese constitution to allow the Japanese Navy, which is currently an offshoot of the police force, to go abroad, to allow them to have peacekeepers around the world, to begin the slow process of slightly more than soft power projection around the globe. And then finally, structural reforms. Well, now it embraces everything from firing lots of government workers right the way through to cutting back on red tape.
Philip Hampshire, thank you very much indeed. It's 1:15.
More on Japan and Shinzo Abe's projected victory later on the program. Now, some of the most dangerous jobs in the world surely must be done by undercover agents who disguise their identities to get inside terrorist networks and stop their attacks. The BBC has been given rare access to an active FBI undercover agent